It's 1950. At the Rand Corporation headquarters in Santa Monica, California, two mathematicians named Merrill Flood and Melvin Drescher design a simple game. There are two players. Each can cooperate or betray. If both cooperate, both win a moderate prize. If one betrays while the other cooperates, the betrayer wins the big prize and the cooperator gets nothing. If both betray, both receive a mediocre prize. The game was played 100 times in a row. And the results surprised the researchers themselves. The players discovered on their own, without instructions, the fundamental tension of the game. In the long run, cooperating yielded better results. But in each individual round, the temptation to betray was enormous. Shortly after, mathematician Albert Tucker gave it the name everyone knows. He imagined two suspects in separate interrogation rooms, each with the option to confess or stay silent. And he called it the prisoner's dilemma. This game, simple enough to fit on a napkin, turns out to be one of the most powerful ideas the social sciences have ever produced. Because it shows up everywhere. In economics, politics, biology, international relations. Whenever two parties must decide whether to cooperate or betray, the prisoner's dilemma is there. In the previous episodes we've seen how markets fail. Externalities, public goods, the tragedy of the commons. In all those cases, there's a common pattern, individually rational decisions producing collectively bad outcomes. Today we're going to understand why. And for that we need to venture into a field born in the mid-20th century, game theory. The mathematical study of strategic decisions, where the outcome of what you do depends on what others do. Let's see the prisoner's dilemma in its classic form. Two robbery suspects are arrested and taken to separate interrogation rooms. They can't communicate. The police offer both the same deal. If you confess and your partner stays silent, you go free and he gets 10 years in prison. If you both stay silent, the police can only prove a minor offense, 1 year each. If you both confess, 5 years each. Each prisoner reasons like this. If my partner stays silent, it's better for me to confess, because I go free instead of serving 1 year. And if my partner confesses, it's also better for me to confess, because I serve 5 years instead of 10. Confessing is the best response no matter what the other does. In game theory jargon, confessing is the dominant strategy. And here's the trap. If both follow their dominant strategy, both confess. And both get 5 years. But if both had stayed silent, they would have gotten only 1. Two rational people, each choosing what's best for themselves, end up in a situation worse than if they'd cooperated. That's the essence of the dilemma. That same year, 1950, a young Princeton mathematician named John Nash published an idea that would earn him the Nobel Prize 44 years later. Nash defined what is now called a Nash equilibrium, a situation where no player can improve their outcome by unilaterally changing strategy. That is, given what the other is doing, neither wants to change. In the prisoner's dilemma, the Nash equilibrium is that both confess. Neither can improve their situation by changing strategy alone. If I switch from confessing to silence while the other keeps confessing, I go from 5 years to 10. Worse. The Nash equilibrium is not the best possible outcome. It's the stable outcome. The point nobody deviates from on their own. And often, as in this case, it's a suboptimal outcome for everyone. This distinction is fundamental. Efficient is not the same as stable. The cooperative outcome, both stay silent, is better for both. But it's not stable. Each has incentives to deviate. The Nash outcome, both confess, is worse for both. But it's stable. Nobody wants to move. The prisoner's dilemma isn't just a board game. It shows up in economic and political situations with astonishing regularity. Think of two companies competing in the same market. Both could maintain high prices and earn comfortable profits. But each is tempted to cut prices to steal the other's customers. If both cut, both earn less. It's a price war. A prisoner's dilemma. OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, is a perfect example. Member countries agree to limit production to keep oil prices high. But each country is tempted to produce a bit more than agreed, sell more, and hope the others comply. If everyone does the same, production rises, prices fall, and everyone loses. And that's exactly what has happened repeatedly in OPEC's history. The arms race during the Cold War was another prisoner's dilemma on a global scale. Both superpowers would have been better off reducing their arsenals. But each feared the other wouldn't. So both kept arming. Billions spent on weapons neither wanted to use. And climate negotiations are perhaps the most important prisoner's dilemma of our time. Every country would benefit from everyone reducing emissions. But each individual country has incentives not to reduce its own, enjoy cheap energy, and hope the others bear the cost. If everyone reasons this way, nobody reduces. And everyone suffers the consequences. But here comes the hopeful part. In 1980, a political scientist at the University of Michigan named Robert Axelrod organized a tournament. He invited game theory experts from around the world to submit strategies for the repeated prisoner's dilemma. Not a single round, but hundreds of rounds in a row, against multiple opponents. He received 14 strategies. Some were complex, with elaborate rules about when to cooperate and when to betray. Others tried to exploit rivals. Others analyzed patterns of past behavior. The winner was the simplest strategy of all. It was called tit for tat. It was submitted by Anatole Rappaport, a Canadian mathematician. And it had only 4 lines of code. The rule was this: cooperate in the first round. Then do whatever your opponent did in the previous round. If they cooperated, cooperate. If they betrayed, betray. Nothing more. Axelrod organized a second tournament, this time with 62 strategies, including participants who already knew the first results. Tit for tat won again. Why did it work so well? Axelrod identified 4 properties. It was nice, it never betrayed first. It was retaliatory, it punished betrayal immediately. It was forgiving, if the other returned to cooperation, so did it. And it was clear, rivals quickly understood how it worked. The lesson was profound. In repeated interactions, cooperation can emerge without contracts, laws, or central authority. All it takes is reciprocity. Memory. The expectation that there will be a tomorrow. Before closing, an important distinction. A zero-sum game is one where what one gains is exactly what the other loses. Poker. Chess. A negotiation dividing a fixed pie. A positive-sum game is one where cooperation can make both gain more than if they compete. International trade. Joint research. Most economic interactions. The prisoner's dilemma is a positive-sum game that turns into a zero-sum game when trust is lacking. Cooperation would grow the pie. But the fear of betrayal means both settle for a smaller slice. And that is, at bottom, the story of much of economics. The challenge of turning positive-sum games into reality. Of creating the institutions, the rules, the incentives that allow rational people to cooperate instead of betraying each other. The prisoner's dilemma explains why cooperation is so difficult and so valuable. It explains why business cartels tend to break apart. Each member has incentives to cheat. It explains why international agreements are so fragile. Each country has incentives to defect. But it also explains why small communities cooperate better than large ones. Because in a small community, interactions repeat. People have names and faces. Reputation matters. Reciprocity is possible. The mechanisms that facilitate cooperation are the pillars of any functional society. Laws, contracts, reputation, trust, courts, social norms. All are, in one form or another, responses to the prisoner's dilemma. Ways of making cooperation stable, predictable, and less risky. When these mechanisms fail, when contracts aren't enforced, when reputation doesn't matter, when the future is too uncertain, cooperation crumbles. And with it, the prosperity that cooperation generates. 3 ideas to take away from this episode. First, the prisoner's dilemma shows that individually rational decisions can produce collectively bad outcomes. Confessing is rational for each prisoner. But if both confess, both end up worse than if they'd cooperated. Second, the Nash equilibrium is the point where nobody wants to change strategy unilaterally. It's stable but not necessarily efficient. And in the prisoner's dilemma, the Nash equilibrium is mutual betrayal. Third, in repeated games, cooperation can emerge. Axelrod showed that a strategy as simple as tit for tat, cooperate first, then mirror the rival, outperforms far more complex strategies. Reciprocity and the expectation of a shared future are the ingredients of cooperation. The prisoner's dilemma assumes both players have the same information. But in the real world, one side almost always knows more than the other. When a used car seller knows the car's history and the buyer doesn't, something strange happens to the market. Next time we'll talk about asymmetric information. About why used cars lose value the moment they leave the dealership. And about an economist who almost couldn't get published the article that would win him the Nobel. That's next time.